8 people. All right. Hi, class. Looks like we have 8 people. We'll go ahead and get started at this point. I believe it's recording now. Okay, good. So, welcome to week 2 of IT 254 about spreadsheets. I've had a very painful week over a number of different issues, not just the fact that I had COVID last week and trying to recover from that, but then proceeded to accidentally break my home internet router Saturday. So as of didn't have internet until late last night. So that's after spending 5.5 hours on the phone with Comcast support, and then another 2.5 hours with their technician here at site, unable to fix the issue before I kind of gave up, went a different direction, and finally got it fixed. It's yesterday. So hope everybody had a much better week than I did. This is we're going to get into a bit about data manipulation and whatnot. I changed a few of my charts this week, kind of a last minute thing to make it more in line with the agenda that CTU has posted for this class that was updated not that long ago. So is there any questions about anything that was discussed during week 1 of this? Because I had not got an email from anybody in the class. All right, let's assume that is a no. All right, so this week we're going a little bit into data manipulation, how some of the text functions work, how columns and rows can be used temporarily, some manipulation, maybe a little bit of exfiltration of data. Just a reminder that the discussion boards due. The first main post is due on Thursday. The IntelliPath stuff is due on Sundays, but at the same time, if you go back and work on IntelliPath 1, I will update your grade, and it will not take any penalty as a result from doing that, because for whatever reason we just have no means of doing tardiness penalties within IntelliPath at this time. So I will go back and occasionally update all the previous week's grades of IntelliPath as we go, improving the progress of the class, and as a result you can go back and continue to update your add more time into any particular unit or part of a unit in order to gain information or gain points as you go. I think overall the first week's class participation in IntelliPath has been good, though I was surprised by the fact we went from 45 down to 38 students in the first week. I didn't expect that. That's far more than it usually happens in week 1, but people have their reasons. 2 of the important videos I'd like you to spend time on is data manipulation and how to create a 2 variable table. We'll get to that in a second. The discussion board assignment this week is about how to make things more readable. If you have a range of cells and you convert them into a table, what would happen to make that table? What do you need to do in order to plan that table? How do you need to make it readable? What do you need to consider for validation? Ideally, if you were to create yourself a budget for your home use, what would you want in that information you're recording? How would you want it laid out? And the benefits of having a table in general, right? So if you were to ask somebody to give you a defined table, well, one of the things that I always am a big proponent of is not having empty cells within a data set. So because it implies incomplete data. Now, there are other people's in philosophies on where that's good and bad, but that's an example of one who's like, well, I'm not a big fan of having incomplete data. I like having all the values known so that I'm always knowing that if it's correct, that what I'm looking at was entered, that there's data there, and I can ensure that is correct by doing so. So, and then, sorry, what advantages you would have from working within Excel, and how would you use it for your own personal use? So, a good example is for budget. Some people use it for managing businesses. Some people use it for handling tracking of inventory or whatever, right? So give some discussions about that in the discussion board. Should be pretty easy. These are the 8 topics this week that IntelliPath will get into. It's about using text functions, temporary rows, subtotals, applying conditional formatting, and other types of capabilities. Some data tools. I'll do a little bit of that as a live demonstration as well. Just to validate a few people's concerns and over some spreadsheet basics. The types of inputs that are allowed into spreadsheets is values. IntelliPath does mention functions, but it's really a combination of values and functions that are entered in the spreadsheet. The correct answer within IntelliPath is actually values, though it's not formulas. People got functions and formulas mixed quite a bit. Functions have to do with behaviors and manipulations and extrapolations of information from other cells to get a answer from something, such as if logic or VLOOKUPs. Those are functions, right? VLOOKUPs is where you pull data from one place to another for pull data out of a cell to another. Sorry. Whereas a formula is used to take values or cells and do mathematical functions primarily against those values. So, but the answer that IntelliPath is looking for is values. Had another question about can I have different headers for each workbook or each page within a workbook, and how do you make that work? And by headers, right, when you look at a normal spreadsheet or data, you typically are looking at something along the lines of columns and rows, and you have like column A, to whatever, and then you have row such and such to whatever, and you can get it to line up the way you want, and then you have your data that's typically in this area, right? So now when it comes to headers and footers, it's really a page layout thing. So up here, if I had, say, this is my header, right? If I go to other pages, it'll pick up that header there. So in this case, it's a footer in that context. So you can have the same thing appear on all your pages for you. Now, there are some neat things you can do within that context. In that, yeah, things. Let's go over here. If your normal default is normal, that's down. This button says normal. Flip over one. It says page layout. When you go to page layout, you get that particular change to how it's actually done, and your page is literally set up to be the size of. In this case, I have it set for landscape. Let's go to portrait just because it makes more sense. Size being legal, which is your typical 8.5 by 11 inch paper. You could go, letterhead, not legal, letterhead page. I could go statement page, which is a much shorter page, so you could break up your pages independently. And you can actually spell out print areas as need be. So going back to letter, let's go to orientation landscape. So that will change what the layout of this table is, or this page is, right? Now up here, you can have specialized macro expansions inside of these headers and footers. So in this case, I said number, or I used the ampersand, page of pages, and I say FOU up here. Well, I could have a different type of footer. So in classification, I could have this. I could actually go also something like date, right? Which gives today's date. It'll automatically expand out those pieces. So if I go to second page, this doesn't know what page number it is because I have no data here because I clicked on it. But if I put in like any kind of data, it now knows this is page 2. If I do it over here, it knows that this was page 3 and this is now page 4. So it could tell you, in this case, I say page number of whatnot, change this up in the corner, and all of those pages now pick up that same kind of modification. So that's really kind of where headers and footers kind of come in nice, because you can use that for report building. Okay. Hope that was all made some sense out of that. Subtotals. All right. So what should be done before using the subtotal function? All right. So one of those things is in subtotals, you need to make sure that a categorical comment, a categorical column has duplicate values. So if there's a couple of videos here that you can look at for how that would work, right? So, but just for the sake of just going there to give you an example of, right? You have to define a column as where your category is at, and when that category thing is, like in this case, this example in this particular website was cookies and bars, and then the types of things. So you could actually build a subtotal format such that you could then get it sorted such that all your bars get sorted right thing with your sub products, and then you could do summaries based on that information. So you could actually, it's like all the bars here in this case total this as a price for a quantity for inventory purposes, and then all the cookies could come up with this price for inventory purposes. Apparently I'm getting hit with lots of notifications at this time of the morning. Sorry, I'm just gonna turn that off. Okay, clear that. All right. So anyways, this is a good web page. It'll give you some how to actually do that, how to set it up, step-by-step instructions on how to get it done. There's also a little video about another person describing it, so you can find that of useful. But the really thing is you have to have a categories that has duplicate values, because then you can do subtotals based on the information inside of that particular categorical column. The mid function in Excel, there are a number of data manipulation functions: mid, upper, lower, left, right. Really, in the case of the mid, it's the cell, the first number of characters, and then the first character position number, and then the number of characters you want to do. So if I did like B34, and I did it on the word apple, say the apple was in cell B2, and I said, all right, starting with the third character, starting with character position 2, I want 3 characters. Let's make this so it actually makes more sense. I could say, all right, from apple, give me those 3 characters. It would be PPL, right? That makes sense. So over in this context, I could say mid this cell. Let's go to let's start with character 5 and give me 5 characters from that, and that'll give me IOSHN from the word conditional, right? It pulls out the center burst of the conditional. You could do that with a number of cases. So if I had this as a test, I'm saying, all right, give me the mid function here from that data set, starting at character 5, give me 8 characters. It gives you is a T, right? From out of this as a test. The same thing if I did left. I say the left of this value, give me the first 7 characters. I get this is with the spaces included as characters. Concatenation, same kind of idea, right? So where I can concatenate several different strings of characters together, values together, and I can get it to give me that kind of value. So it's useful for things like if I needed to have, like, say you're getting something from a website and it comes up garbled like this in your source data. Well, you could have somebody go in there and manipulate your data so you get like this type of piece, go fix your data set, and then if you needed to manipulate it, well, you could do it based on number of characters, or in another context, you could do it such that you go text the columns and say this information is delimited by a particular character type. In this case, I'm going to use the pipe character, and it will change it from what you see in the cell to what becomes now 3 different cells, so that you can then work on fixing your data set so that you can then build out like a list of people, list of customers and whatnot. So you can start building like an informational set with the text to column. You can use the mid, left, and right functions to build that kind of stuff out. So that's all kind of just useful information in that context. Another thing that wasn't real clear here is you could go to home font area and you could like change colors of fonts to whatever you think makes sense. You could bold it, you could italicize it, right? You could also say in here, which is just a set of information, you could do a more conditional formatting, and say, all right, a new rule here is only it's cells that contain numerics from say 0 to we'll go 1000. You could say, all right, I want those to be bold. I want them to be yellow, and I say I want to fill them automatically with purple or blue in the background, so that anything that meets this as a numerical value in that range of data, it'll do that with. So you can have stuff stand out to you, and alternatively, you can set it up so you can see red numbers, like, well, things that exceeds extremes, or ignoring text. You can get it to come up this way. So that's another case of conditional formatting and data manipulation you can do pretty easily to help with understanding what data set you're looking at and what it is that you're trying to accomplish within that context. So, but like I said, there's other functions, upper, lower. Those are some other ones that are commonly used. So if I wanted to say upper of this cell, what happens is it turns it all into uppercase. If I wanted to say lower as a function of all this text here, it'll convert it to just lowercase. So that's another way you can use it to also manipulate your information that you're using within your data set. So you can get your stuff to look the way you want it to look, right? And ultimately, you can turn your data set into something really functional, like having diagrams and charts that can be dynamically updated based on information you have in that. So all right, back to over here. Yeah, text to column, upper lower, converting pieces. There's another discussion board video you can go watch for this. In fact, is that the same one? That is the same one. So at this point, I'm going to queue it up for a few minutes and have you guys watch the video itself. let's make sure that, yep, okay. All right.
All right, so in this video, we're going to be looking at a two-variable data table. So really, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. You need two variables. Here, I'm going to use the number of apples, and we're going to put in an arbitrary number. It doesn't matter what you put in here. I just want to show you, to begin with, the formula that we're going to be using. And the price per apple, we're going to put in $10 as well. And now, to be able to do a data table, you're going to need to be solving something. So you need a formula. So we're going to use a very simple formula here, number of apples times the price of apples, which gives us total fruit sales in dollars. Now to set up our data table, in this top left corner here, we're going to need to link to this formula. You always have to be linking to a formula. Now we're going to need to enter some row data. Basically, these are the variables that we want to see. So for instance, I'm going to use 5, my number of apples is going to be 5, and we're simply going to increase it by 5 for each one. So here we have 5 apples, 10 apples, 15 apples, 20, 25. If we want, we can label it number of apples. And here we need the column, which is going to be the price per apple. So let's do $2, and we'll increase it by $2 for each one. Now, these can of course be anything, but what we can see is that this data table is going to output, based on this formula, this. So it's going to simply multiply the column by the row. So here we should have 40, here we should have 10, here we will have 20. Now to pull up the data table, and I'm going to show you this using all hotkeys. I recommend using the keyboard. I almost never use a mouse, and that's the Excel Pro way. Once you get it down, you'll be much, much faster, and you'll impress your friends and your boss as well. So in order to access the data table, you're going to use Alt-A for the data tab. You can obviously click this with your mouse as well, but I prefer the shortcut keys. And then W for the what-if analysis. You can either use the number key, or the arrow keys to move down, or you can just press the T. We're going to press data table. It's going to bring up this dialog box, and basically we just need to input two variables, which of course we have a two-variable data table. So we're going to select our row input cell, and the row is obviously just whatever's up here. This is on the row, and this is the column. So the row is going to be the number of apples, and we press the tab key to drop into the cell input cell, and this is going to be the price. So these are the two variables that are going to be changed, and when we press OK, it's going to fill in the blanks. And I think we'll just make this a dollar symbols, and let's see, I'm using the hotkeys Alt H9 to get rid of decimal places. So this is solving. As we said, this should be 10, this is 40, this is 20. And the interesting thing is this actually doesn't matter. You don't need anything in these boxes. It's not using those. I was just showing that to demonstrate that the formula works. But this is actually where the variables are now being programmed. So that's a two-variable data table. If you have any questions on those, or want to see some more examples, just let me know in the comments.
So yeah, so that's an example of the two-variable table. That it's how you can use to quickly build out numerical analysis, and you might want to do at a later date. There we go. All right, back to PowerPoint. All right, so another example is conditional formatting. One of the ones that I found that was kind of confusing from a question inside of Telepath, but I don't know if they've actually adjusted the question yet. But in this case, one of the questions from Telepath, it asks what conditional rule was applied to the spreadsheet below, because it had red boxes around this. And unless you had more information, it's kind of hard to give that answer. So, or if you knew how to do what I showed you with the conditional formatting to cause it to cause changes, colors and whatnot, right over here on this particular piece. So what it did is basically they decided to do, instead of the way I did, where I did conditional formatting. So we'll clear all the rules of it. Clear that. But what they did was, over in data validation, they say, all right, any whole number between some number, we'll just say in this case 1 and 500, right? Well, they had this kind of come up with a piece of that. So what it was is circle invalid stuff. So what they did is they set up their conditional formatting, and they manipulated it such that it produced boxes around something based on a rule. In this case, they did based on a formula where what is the average of all the monthly totals of all of the salespeople, and did a conditional format, or not a conditional format, did a data validation that caused those to be numbers that are below the average to be given a red border. So they did some fancy rules inside of there without any explanation of how you got to that. But the answer, if you see this, is below average with the red border in this context, because in this case, the average sales is 6556, which is the number they used for their calculation. And they did basically every value below that was then boxed off with a red box. So hope that made sense on what you were actually looking at in that context, but it'll give you an idea. So they basically took a two variable data table, figured out the monthly sales average of the various people over the course of a month's worth of sales, and then figured that out. So they knew who was performing well and who was performing below the average of everybody collectively, which is skewing the numbers, because if you had, in this case, 10 people selling stuff and only 2 were above the average, it's because you had somebody that was so good, so much better than everybody else, that they skewed the average. And you don't want to necessarily punish employees because of one person being super performant versus what your traditional averages is, unless you're like certain industries, I guess. Yeah. Another thing, if you wanted to change text on fonts, right? So what you do is you go over to, no, that didn't do me any good. Over here, clear all that. Get rid of the validation too, just because. Any value. All right. So I was about to do, oh yeah, the coloring. So another basic thing you can do with text font, if you go to home font, you can change colors. You can change boldness. You can change your cell fill in. So that's over in the home font thing. There's another thing called page layout themes. There's a little link to that too, but there's a mention on one of the IntelliPaths that talks about clicking on the what tab to does section to change the color fonts, and it's really its home font is where you need to go to do that, not page layout or page font. So yeah. So I just showed you this, where you can do like whole number validations. In this case, you want numbers here. You want to make sure the employees, hours, stuff, and whatnot. That was to make sure you have entry of correct data by putting whole numbers, so it'll flag you when you put invalid numbers in. Numbers, the right, left, mid, they all based on the cell of data, the number of characters of that. So if I did right A1 or A2, Go back over here. This being the right function, right? So if I wanted to do this, sorry, yeah, expand that out so you see this whole string. Say this is a different example. I said the last 7 characters here of this, it gives the word example. So that's where you get this. So it's like cell number of last characters. So that's why this is 45 from the string. And yeah, so you can get into all kinds of different things. You could build in a series. You could do fills. You can clockwise your characters if you using certain contexts. When he talks about a clockwise arrow and labeling, it always goes from top to bottom, left to right. So that's why Sunday is tilted down at 45 degrees. Whereas if you did it and say Monday, it's 180 plus 45. So it's 225 degrees is what the word Monday here would be. I hope that all made sense. Everybody understood everything I talked about there? Any questions? Did I lose interest of everybody in the class already? Okay. All right. So another thing we'll get into is charts and what their uses are, right? So we have pie charts, bar charts, column charts, line charts, and scatter plots. Those are the 5 most basic charts people ever see. Pie charts are those which gives you slices of a pie to represent percentages of a whole. A pie chart is always based on 100% total. A bar chart is this kind of thing where you have a scale of one type and then another left to right, where you see the bar charts gives you how big it is up in that scale. So in this case, if these were percentages of out of 100 points, number of points out of 100 for these individual projects, you could tell for individual project 1, the blue is a 91 in this case. It dropped to 0 there because I changed it and didn't change it back. If I change it to 60, you see it jumps up to 60 in this case, right? So that's what a bar chart looks like, or a bunch of side bar charts. You can get column charts, line charts, which are more traditional. You've seen the trending line analysis, where there's XY plots with lines up and down. Pretty typical when you look at like Dow Jones averages and whatnot. Basic elements of chart is the title, legend, and axis. So looking over here, back at the this piece, when the title in this case is CTU grade average in this particular chart, the legend is then the color code here, which tells you which class it is. The XY axis tells you the different scales. So you could actually see how 2 different layouts of the same kind of chart both could look in that context. But that's like gives you the axes, the labeling, chart plots. So that's some basic pieces of it, right? Some elements charts is every chart has vertical or horizontal axes with labeled data. Their title to the axis is the title to the chart. Grid lines, if you're using like a plot, a line chart or a plot chart or a scatter plot. Trend lines if you're using, or spark lines if you're trying to communicate how trends go with arrows based on changes. So, zigzags up and down with arrows. You can have other elements such as colors, styles. That's some basic information about it. So typically the data is linked directly to the chart. That's why you saw this get modified directly as numbers change. So if I gave this person a couple of bad scores here, right? You can see how the chart themselves will actually dynamically update. So that's all part of the same process here. Oh, we have another person just joined this class. Hello, Marcia. Okay. Yeah. So one of the big things is what you're using your data set for, and that is to problem solve or deep dive into data analysis. Maybe doing complex formulas or whatnots, right? So you could do compound interest. You could project your retirements. You can project anything with numbers, right? You could do it in analysis on your inventory. So if you know it that such and such wholesaler is selling you widget A at this price in this quantity, but wholesaler B does a different price for a larger quantity, a cheaper price but a larger quantity, and you can tell, well, based on your sales projections, which would be a better deal for you to have overall. Can you afford taking the large quantity from an inventory perspective because it sits on the shelf longer, or does it move fast enough where the quantity makes sense and take the discounted price because you're using that much more faster, right? So you can do analysis, come up what if scenarios to figure out that type of stuff for doing business logic, for your determining when to make changes or decisions inside of a business, which is kind of nice. So, oops. You can also use it to validate data, like I showed you, right? But you have to always remember that problem is if your data is bad to begin with, what you get out of it from your analysis will also be bad analysis. So you always have to make sure you have good data to start with before you spend a significant amount of time doing that. So always make sure you massage your data to make sure it's correct, it's accurate, it's reasonable, and that it meets all the criteria you expect it to be. So when you do a deep dive analysis, that you get the right answer out of it. You can do all kinds of different data validation pieces. I showed you some examples: whole numbers, text. It can be applied after it's already been created as a table. I showed you the invalid data piece with the circles. At the most basic level, the what if scenarios, goal seeker, scenario manager, those kinds of things help give you ways to do quick what if strategies for business and analysts logic. It can help you solve basic things, and if it gets into really complicated stuff, sometimes it's even worth it to build a couple of visual basic tools so you can have it manipulate data for you in a automated manner that's consistent in a very involved, multifaceted level, so you can always get the right answer out of it, right? Or to confirm that it produces charts for you in a manner that makes sense. Macros are also very good at time saving and helping you establish ways to build that type of stuff. Macros could be, as an example of a very basic macro. Let's go back to the things to do over here. Right. So you saw this was done with a concatenate function. Well, another way to do that is you could say that and that and that and that. Well, that's using a macro to effectively do the same thing as a concatenation, is by using the ampersand, by just adding these cells contents together in a concatenated manner. So you can build other types of macros too. VLOOKUPs, HLOOKUPs, those are examples of functions you can use to help with macros. There's also a lot of different pieces inside of Muse here that helps with some of these pieces. The formatting and data manipulation websites, you'll have the links inside the PowerPoint here. You can go and look up stuff. You get into advanced data management, some spreadsheet integration, charts and graphs, which will go more into charts and graphs in the next thing. I showed you some examples of the header and footer pieces, but you can also do other stuff in this as well, such that, say you build yourself a logo, I could say picture in that here, and when I do that, click out of that cell, it then tells me to go look for a file somewhere on my computer, and I don't know if you can see that part or not. There we go. Oh, it does let you see that. Okay. So, so if I go to in Excel activities, I have picture logo. I can then actually add your business logos up here as part of your page layout. So while you don't see them on your normal side, you can build a report page that pulls the data in that you print out that has your logos, has your company name here, say for instance, right? And number of pages, and you could have something that brings in your data from your spreadsheet, and then you could just build out your ability to issue purchase orders to customers or bills to your customers that way too, and make it look nice as a report. So another thing here is if I had a table of first name, last name, I could very easily go. Actually, I want to do the other way. I go last name and quote, comma, space, quote, say Mr. space, quote, and this, and I could very easily have that data all set up so you have your macro just automatically project stuff. So you can actually do ampersand quotes with your basic pieces and just add in text if you want to here. Text here. So then it will change all of those same functions that same way inside your table. So you could do quite a bit of neat little manipulation in that context. So and yeah, if you take data that's exported as CSVs, you can then import it directly into your Excel by dragging or dropping or opening it as an Excel and just dragging that workbook from one CSV workbook over to the master workbook, and it drops it as a tab of that name. And you can merge hundreds of CSVs very rapidly. Or one of the things I have at work is I built a VB script to export all of my tabs of large spreadsheets out as individual CSV files so that I can just save them off, have it just crank through each one on its own, save them all off on their own. So I have them there. So any questions on anything so far in this class today? Anything else you guys want to learn about? Any questions you have, you want to know? I'm here for your entertainment. All right, well, let's not say that. All right, well, I don't have anything else to share or to talk about in this class for today. So if there's no questions, good luck, have fun, enjoy IntelliPath, and send me questions in email if you have them. Make sure you get your discussion boards done in time. They're due on Thursday for your initial posting. And I wish you all a great week. Thanks.
Thank you.